Well, it's a great honor for me to be here tonight. I'm a great fan of Martin's work, and especially this new one. I'm looking forward to asking him some questions. So we'll get started right away.
Let me just say, this way. Just to say, can you hear me?
No.
How frequently impressed by how Americans actually get out of the house and go to things. In England, if your long lost twin brother, who happened to be your favorite living writer, was giving a talk next door, it would never occur to you to look in. But if you're like the U.S. Postal Service, not rain, not snow, not dark at night, can stay these couriers from the completion of their appointed run.
Nowadays already won you over. Now
That's not fair.
So Martin, maybe we'll just start with the new novel, and especially with that pesky subtitle. State of England, Lionel Asbo's State of England, which you were quoted recently saying that your daughter said, "Enough with the subtitles, Daddy."
For crying out loud. 12 years old, and said it with real passion. She's already intuited that it's nothing but trouble or something.
But it's sort of accurate, isn't it? I mean, you're trying, and this novel is in a sense trying to give a sense of what England is today, and
there used to be a sort of genre of novels called State of England novels, State of the Nation novels, which were very earnest novels of ideas. Therefore, everyone sounded the same, and there were lots of academics and bureaucrats talking in identical phrases about the state of various institutions. And I was ironically glancing at that and saying that it is a reading of England, take on England, but not in that earnest mode.
And you said it's not really satire per se. You kind of reject that idea.
Well, I've never really satisfied myself that I understand what satire is. And the most glamorous sounding definition is Northrop Frye's, which is satire as militant irony. In other words, that it's irony that is intense enough to suggest that what you want is to bring about change, but novels don't do that. There are occasional historical coincidences, and George Eliot's Daniel Deronda was hugely influential in encouraging the shape of Zionism. It was the most influential novel in the 19th century. But the only change that fiction is capable of bringing about is change within the reader, I think, and that you hope, you dream that your best readers will read you and then be, minutely fortified and enriched by what you write, and their perception. That's what I feel when I read someone I really admire. That the world has a better color after I've read them, and it's more Nabokov's line that gloomy writers are just ridiculously unobservant. And gloomy people in general, they just don't see how talented the world is visually, and how comical it is. And that's what you're trying to instill.
And one of the sort of comic elements in this book is your view of your look at the underclasses of Britain, the criminal classes, as we might call them here.
Yeah, let's call them that.
We'll call them that, yeah. And I'm wondering that some critics have sort of accused you of, as it were, sort of slumming it, that here you are, this kind of upper middle class writer, and you're kind of looking at the criminal classes. But how do you respond to that?
That's absolutely pathetic.
No.
Intellectually pathetic, and amazingly snobbish. they want to ghettoize the working class. I'm actually not upper middle class. I'm bohemian. I once said to my father when we seemed to be living a much grander life than previously, and I said to him, I was about 16, I said, Dad, are we nouveau riche? And he said, well, very nouveau and not at all riche. But no, you account yourself to be not of that system, and never of that system. And the bohemian class is the intellectual class, the sleazy, drunken class. But I've been writing about the criminal classes and what used to be called the residuum, now called the underclass, for 40 years without challenge. And to see people searching for self-righteousness in this direction is pitiful. I've written a novel where one of the three main characters was the King of England, Henry IX, Yellow Dot. Am I to be forbidden from doing that? Dickens
seems to be questioning the whole point of literature.
Yeah, various noble, Saul Bellows remarked that there is a universal eligibility to be noble, and that very much includes even Lionel Asbo and his nephew Desmond Tutu.
But let's talk about them for a bit. I don't know, I assume most people here have read the book, or perhaps you just want to introduce us to Lionel Asbo and his nephew, and then we can talk about their nobility, I think.
Well, should I perhaps read that?
Yeah, I want to do that.
10 minutes. Lionel Asbo is a very violent but not very successful criminal who works in, as far as his nephew Desmond can see, Desmond is a mixed race teenager when the novel opens, has to do with the very hairiest end of debt collection. And on his debt collecting sorties, Lionel likes to get his two pit bull dogs, whom he feeds them on Tabasco and mutton vindaloo from Indian restaurants, and also gets them drunk on special brew, which is the sort of lethal malt lager. And he said they're hopeless, they're useless when they're drunk, when they're actually drunk, they're staggering about it. But the next day, then they're tasty. And in fact, the novel has a refrain because it prefigures a terrible revenge that might or might not be taken later on. Who let the dogs in? That was going to be the question. Who let the dogs in? Who? Anyway, Lionel has been struggling, a subsistence criminal, I describe that. And he's noticed that one of his brothers, he has 5 brothers called John, Paul, George, Ringo, and Stuart. Stuart Sutcliffe, the forgotten beaver. Someone once said in the New Yorker that it would be handy if we reclassified everyone as either a John, Paul, a George, or a Ringo. Might simplify things. For instance, in court, you could say, I submit, Your Honor, that this is far too complicated a crime for a Ringo to have committed. My wife always says to me that I'm a Paul who's trying to be a John. But in fact, I'm a George. 2009, Lionel Asbo, Lotto Love. Ringo has won the lottery twice. First time he won £10, and the second he won £12.50. It was as he was mucking out which is to say, it was as he was passing his spoutless kettle of shit to the aproned orderly that Lionel Asbo first got wind of the fact he'd just won very slightly less than £140 million. Yeah, you've had a bit of luck, apparently. Don't know what, said Officer Phipps. The light wants a word. You'll be sent for. The who, said Lionel. The light, you know, light of your love, gov, love, gov. That's rhyming slang. Lionel said, Jesus, you need your head seen for you. And rhyming slang's all crap. Officer Phipps continued to go about his tasks. According to him, he said, you had a bit of good fortune. He's well pissed off about it and all. Yeah, what's this then? You'll be sent for. Lionel turned to his cellmate, Pete New, and said, drop charges. Looks like they've seen reason and dropped charges. Yes, Lionel, could very well be. Stalwart prison was a remand prison for those awaiting trial or sentence, and its inmates were banged up on a colourful array of charges, banged up for non-payment of alimony, banged up for serial rape, banged up for possession of marijuana, banged up for knifing a family of 6. Well, let's hope so, said Pete New. Pete New was banged up for having a fat dog. Banged up for having a fat dog, said Lionel on his first day there. I know, said New, sounds stupid. Yes, well, 12 reprimands and 5 final warnings from the social. Tinkerbell, New's basset hound, was 14 stone. She could only sleep and eat. She lay there on the mattress with her limbs splayed out flat. She has to be turned, see, Tinkerbell, or you try, and she creates. She makes a right old racket. And then the neighbours, Lionel said, what do you have a fucking dog for if you let it get into that state? You ought to give it an appropriate diet. New shrugged humbly and limped back to his bunk. He had his left leg in a light cast. Pete New had managed to snap a ligament while watching TV. 11 hours in the same position. When he readied himself to get to his feet, he said he heard it pop. You snapped a ligament watching TV? I know, it doesn't sound too clever either. You want to brush up your ideas, mate. Well, you know how it is, Mr. Asbo. Call me Lionel. At 2 in the afternoon, Officer Phipps came to fetch him. Best of luck, Lionel, said Pete New from his bunk. Asbo sauntered freely down the stone passage. The thing is that Lionel doesn't mind being in prison. We wonder throughout the novel why this is, and his nephew Desmond, who goes on to be a crime reporter, says that actually this defines the criminal class. They don't mind being in prison. It's just another part of what they have to go through. And in the end, Lionel tells him why he doesn't like prison. And this is, funny enough, a line from Trotsky, who said that he didn't mind going to the Peter and Paul fortress when he's arrested by the Tsarist regime in Petrograd, as it then was called, because he said, Trotsky said, you have most of your creature comforts and you don't have to worry about being arrested. Asbo sauntered freely down the stone passage. He was led up 4 flights of steps, then through a hall bracingly redolent of vomit and carbolic, and then out onto the colonnade with its dripping arches. The governor's door stood wide open. Slight, bald, with frizzled eyebrows and a bulging forehead, Governor Wolfe did not at all resemble the bearer of good news as he said dryly, here he is, the estimable Mr. Asbo. I suppose you just plug away at it, don't you, Lionel, month after month, with your brain hurting and your tongue sticking out of the corner of your mouth, plugging away at the lottery. The lottery, said Lionel, of course I don't. You think I'm stupid? What about it? What about it? Lionel barely remembered you'd only stolen the coupon to give a certain old lag and niggle. It's a load of bollocks anyway. He stood there with his hands in his pockets. Governor Wolfe, who had long ago stopped trying to make Lionel call him sir, said again, "What about it?" Sighing, Lionel said, "Okay, you got me up here because I won 15 quid. It's a mug's game, the lottery, if you ask me." Governor Wolfe threw his pencil onto the desk and said, "Well, I suppose this proves that God's got a sense of humour." Lionel grew alert. "It's more than £15, Asbo. It's a substantial sum." Like a soldier, Lionel went from the at ease posture to full attention. "How substantial, sir?" Owing to an earlier infraction, Lionel was confined to his cell. But the next morning, Pete New was carted off to the sand for an hour of physiotherapy. And when he came back, he said, "You're on the front page of the Sun." A recumbent Lionel was examining his fingernails. He said, "Headline, Lionel Asbo, lotto luck. Photo, you outside the Old Bailey, being led away, giving the finger." And among they have a recap of his criminal career, the highlight of which is Lionel's mugshot and profile shot at the age, of his first arrest at the age of 3. Lionel merely shrugged and New ventured to say, "Wasn't there a box you could tick, Lionel? You should have ticked it, confidential or whatever. Now you'll never get a moment's peace." "I'm not bothered," he said, "by the publicity. I can handle it. You know, Pete, the funny thing is, I never done the lottery in all my life. Fucking mug's game, if you ask me." Now, just one more little paragraph. And this is when Lionel gets out of prison, checks into the most expensive hotel in London, gets thrown out of that, checks into the second most expensive hotel in London, and gets thrown out of that, etc. And then he finds peace in a hotel dedicated to rock stars, where he's considered a model guest. And he goes out. He goes out with strolls out for dinner one night by himself, and the 3 guys from the press are sort of joshing him, and he's joshing them back. And they said, "You off to the bingo, Lionel?" Because he's wearing a fantastically expensive suit made of chatouche wool. It must have cost something like £80,000. And a terrible flunked shirt and waistcoat and so on. And he goes into a fish restaurant, the oldest restaurant in London, and gets into a terrible fight with his lobster. And the decisive moment comes when he throws down his irons, the skewers and nutcrackers, and reaches for the enemy with his bare hands. Now he leaves. He swung himself down the steps and out into the alley, his tie half off, his jacket, shirt, and waistcoat colourfully pasted with butter and blood. He felt very hungry. "The bingo get a bit rough, Lionel," said the man from the Sun. "Just stand there a minute, Lionel," said the man from the Lark, as he raised his camera. "Ooh, this is priceless, this is." "The old ladies take their revenge on you, Lionel," said the man from the Daily Telegraph. Lionel glanced right. Far end of the alley there was a policeman standing stock still and staring his way. "Caught them watching. That settles the matter," said Lionel Asbo succinctly. He moved to his left. "Come on then," he said wearily. "Get our Christless at it. Go on, get you laughing, done with." "Yeah, I will. I'll do 5 years for the 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'm glad you read that. That lobster scene, I think, is one of the great moments in the book. And I think what you got a little bit into when you're reading, which I think is sort of a great kind of drama in the book, is this is how Lionel kind of wins the lottery and becomes this kind of famous character, and he's really kind of propelled there through the kind of tabloid culture. I'm curious sort of your thoughts on sort of how the tabloids kind of make. I mean, he's kind of made a star by the tabloids, and then sort of unmade by them, and remade, and I think it's sort of very interesting to sort of watch how this character sort of kind of in some way loses control of who he is.
Everyone says that this isn't peculiar to England, that the celebrity culture of people famous for being famous and for nothing else. Kim Kardashian is the same everywhere. But you don't have the New York Post makes the Sun in London. The New York Post, in comparison, is like Atlantic Monthly. And there are 4 such tabloids. And it's the culture is much deeper, and it's also much more sentimental. And it's not really surprising if you know England that Lionel becomes a sort of national treasure. And I've always thought that the Murdoch scandal has revealed that they have appalling ways of getting their stories. But the stories and the emphasis of their stories would be disgraceful even if they were delivered by the stalk. I mean, it's the kind of stories. And the tabloids, in my view, very much underestimate the generosity and tolerance and easy humour of British people. And they're always much more vicious than the actual people. The most spectacular example was Princess Diana when she died. And there was this huge wave of, I think, millennial sentimentality about her. Very sort of rather murky and violent, but tearfully pro-Diana. And the tabloids were putting photographs, mock-up photographs of Diana on their front covers, which had her as a sort of angel ascending to heaven. And I'm always reminded of Don DeLillo's remark in White Noise that in all representations of heaven, it turns out that heaven is always partly cloudy. And they're putting that on their front pages while taking out of the middle pages long character assassinations saying she was a slut and slept with Arabs. And they've been completely caught by surprise by that. So it's there's brutality, but the other side of the coin of that is sentimentality, and that's why Lionel is exalted by that.
Right, and he ends up sort of pairing up. It's hard to describe the relationship, but pairing up with one of the great tabloid creations, which is Threnody. And she's someone who she's a sort of there's some sort of modern day examples of her in England today.
Well, yeah, I mean Katie Price, but she wants to be Katie Price, and she's not a novelist and memoirist like Katie Price.
But she's a poet.
I say this as somebody who's read several volumes of autobiography. No, she's a poet. So that's just to make it even more vague.
But she's sort of an expert at the tabloids. I mean, when she and Lionel are in this relationship, and she decides they need to kind of boost their image, she flies off to Afghanistan to kind of win over the troops, and then of course the tabloids start loving them.
Yeah, and Lionel starts to be very patriotic and tearful, saying, praising the Queen and that sort of thing. And again, always in this sort of tearful, sentimental way that seems to me the heart of the whole culture.
And actually, there's something quite sentimental, if I dare, about Lionel and how he's portrayed.
Well, the truth is that you adore your characters indiscriminately, and you don't have any favourites, like your children. And you can't create a character without love. You can't. I'm more and more convinced that in fiction you can't do anything without love, and the main love is for the reader. But you create your characters with that in mind too. And he's I'm going to say I thought that Desmond is the sentimentally conceived character.
Even more so, but he's sort of less surprising in a way.
No, yeah.
I mean, because Lionel's he's allowed. He's someone who spent his life beating people up and yet he ends up sort of, I think, kind of warm to him as the novel goes along.
Although he does contemplate an act of revenge that is Hitlerite in its severity. But Updike was surely right when he said that what we like in fiction is life. If the character is alive, we don't care what they do. That's why we like the villains. We like Becky Sharps, and its expressiveness is what we like. And another writer said that the covers of a novel are like the bars of a cage, and we're free to admire the tiger in the zoo with its beautiful greeny yellow eyes and incredible bulk and severity, because they can't do us any harm. And that's the great freedom of fiction.
Just to return to an earlier point we were talking about, is sort of the state of England, and this seems like it's a very kind of Dickens or Trollope novel, that you've got these characters, they're kind of stuck in these difficult circumstances, and they're trying to sort of fight their way out, especially Desmond is, really.
I would say Dickens, all Dickens, and no Trollope. I mean, Dickens, everyone knew pretty well from the start that Dickens was a great writer. What they took them decades to work out is whether he's a serious writer. And he doesn't obey the rules of social realism that Trollope and George Eliot and Jane Austen laid down. The nearest analog to Dickens in the 20th century is the Disney cartoon. It's not realistic. There are transformations, there are strict journeys from which people come back metamorphosed. There are parental mysteries. There are huge rewards, huge punishments. It's an arbitrary kind of fairy tale, nursery rhyme kind of world. And I always had Dickens in mind when I was writing this book, and many of the place names are from him. But it was not till I was very near the end that I realized that this too was a kind of cartoonish fairy tale.
Well, the lottery is always a sort of fantastical, it pulls you out of where you were and pops you into something.
Yeah, hidden treasure.
Right, exactly. But speaking of kind of fantastical quality, there's this great line that Lionel says, I think it's near the end, when he says, when you have a slag for an old lady, it all fails. His mother, saying his mother was a what's the American?
Well, the mother had her first child at the age of 12,
Right.
and had 7 children before she was old enough to vote. And they were all of different ethnicities. So Desmond tries to imagine how it looked to Lionel, when he was in a high chair with a pacifier in his mouth, to see this incredible zoo of brothers, and his mother not nearly out of her teenage years. And that colours his whole relationship with women as he sees it.
Well, he can't quite escape his mother in the end.
And it doesn't help that Desmond, who's 15 when the novel opens, is having an affair with his grandmother, which is sort of signal of slightly dysfunctional family arrangements. But don't forget that she's only 24 years older than he is, because Desmond's mother started early too.
I was rereading recently one of your earlier novels, Dead Babies, your second novel. And there's a line in there that says you can get away with most things these days, which is about the kind of excess of the hippie culture. And I think there's something very much a similar sentiment in this novel, that you kind of, there's a sort of some kind of remarkable what Lionel does. I mean, he's kind of trashing hotel rooms and going after women, abusing them and all this kind of thing. And he seems to get away with it all, doesn't he?
Well, he doesn't at the end, no.
But he ends up where he wants to be.
What, in Britain?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
But I'm just curious about the sort of morally permissive society, about the sort of, have we reached the kind of, are we sort of post-permissive, and sort of nothing has any value anymore, nothing has any consequences.
It may look that way, but the novel as a form is always strictly moralistic. I don't think there are any good, let alone great novels that aren't quite tight morally. And actually, that was the trouble I had when I wrote this novel quite fast and thought, great, that took a year and then a couple of months to polish it, and then it'll be done. And it, in fact, took me a year to revise. And it was because things weren't morally tight. And it's not, and it's actually, I've never thought about this in quite this way, but it's as if morality is an aesthetic quality, as we sense it partly is. And a novel has to be watertight morally. And it isn't an imposed morality. And you may want to defy it, and you can if you make the necessary adjustments in a novel. But it has to be right morally, which is, I think, sort of very encouraging.
And has its own internal morality too, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
within the work itself. Yeah. And how did you, if you might just, what were you sort of tightening? What was the morality that you felt it was missing?
What was wrong was that Desmond's grandmother starts having an affair with a boy who's even younger than Desmond. And Desmond is passed over for a younger man. And Lionel finds out about this. And this is very necessary for the emotion of the plot, in that what Lionel does to that young boy prefigures what he would do to Desmond if he ever found out about it. What he does is, Desmond asks, the boy has disappeared. There are pictures all over the streets of this imaginary borough in London saying, have you seen this boy? He's disappeared. There are policemen coming to the school. He's disappeared. And Desmond says, did you kill him, Uncle Lionel? And he said, I wouldn't do that. He's nothing to me. He's not a relation or anything like that. Why would I kill him? He said, I didn't kill him. I sold him. And he sold him to a ring of paedophiles. But that was there, but it was just stated. It hadn't been earned. It was this question when you're writing that you can't, sometimes you just state something and you haven't earned it, and I hadn't earned that. So I had to go and solidify all that and make that morally intelligible. And it was a lot of work.
Yeah, well, it shows and reads wonderfully that way. But, speaking of morality, the way you describe the distant, which is where most novel is set and where everyone comes from, which is a sort of made-up neighborhood of London, sort of dystopia, and you kind of you describe it as kind of almost sort of radioactive quality to it, and it's as if the entire place is sort of immoral, is kind of rotting, is sort of kind of putrefying.
Yeah, and the age structures are all wrong, and mortality rates are the same as Djibouti, and the birth rate is the same as Yemen. Everyone dies very young, but lots of children, so it's never going to be thinning out. But it's a world of pregnant schoolgirls, toothless hoodies, crippled 30-year-olds, demented 40-year-olds, and non-existent 60-year-olds. The whole age structure has been compressed, and everyone starts, like Lionel's criminal career begins when he's 3. And at one point, Desmond's father-in-law is sickening, ailing, and Lionel says, how old is he? He says, and Desmond says, 50. He says, getting up there. And I just thought there was a sort of a terrible comedy in all that. And it is, you do sometimes feel, the cliche is broken Britain, you do feel that it is, as a society, as we feel that about every advanced society, that there are huge pressures and strains.
I mean, has Britain declined? Is all the good has gone and only the worst remains? Is that where Britain is today?
Well, that's an eternal illusion that all the good has gone. Ubi sunt, where are they now? The heroes are old. And in fact, things are worse. Children no longer obey their parents. That was written in excrement on the walls of a cave, millennia ago. It's an eternal resentment that. But politically you can measure it, and Britain peaked in about 1870, and then was ruined by the world wars, and this coincided exactly with the emergence of America, which you might begin to talk about as the dominant power. And if the projections are right, then the American century the idea of the American century will turn out to be exactly accurate. And that China is going to overtake, the economy is going to overtake America in 2045.
45, right. So we're in the late American Empire here then, and you've just returned from Tampa, Florida.
Yeah.
Where you were observing the Republican convention for Newsweek and Daily Beast, which your article came out earlier this week. Tell us some of your impressions of the convention, of the late American Empire on stage.
Well, I said that the only thing Romney has never wavered on, he's wavered on everything else except his religion. So I had to look at that religion, and a huge embarrassment it is too. 87 wives for Joseph Smith, 70 for Brigham Young. Sympathy with the South during the Civil War. Not until the 1960s did they, to the further revelation, disclose that black people are the same, have the same souls as white people. A deep contempt for women, and that's why they didn't give the VP pick to Condi Rice, who had by far the biggest welcome of everyone there down in Tampa, and would be a terrifying choice for VP. And she gives them women, color, and foreign policy. But they rejected her because she believes that women can achieve things, and they don't like that. Anyway, the Romney's speech later that night, the next night, failed to reveal whether he's the kind of guy that the average American would like to have a glass of water with. As for his running mate, Paul Ron, now I know that should be Paul Ryan, really, but it's easy to get him mixed up with Ron Paul. To pro-life, I think we should stop saying pro-life and start saying anti-choice. While agreeing with Clinton that abortions should be safe, legal, and rare. But why are Republicans always defeated by a simple declarative sentence? They can't talk right. Paul Ryan said, "I'm as pro-life as anyone gets," he said.
Nixon could.
What?
Nixon could talk right.
Yeah, later.
He said, "I'm not a crook."
I'm as pro-life as anyone gets, and in fact his voting record establishes him as the most extreme candidate for major office, including things like judges and district commissioners for close to a century. But when he was modifying his position, which they always seem very ready to do, saying, well, it's Romney, it's Mitt Romney who will decide this, and he's for exceptions in the case of rape, incest, and the life of the mother. Which is sort of shorthand for if it endangers the life of the mother. And he says, I think that's a good step in the right direction. Not a bad step in the right direction, or a good step in the wrong direction, but a good step in the right direction. Then why was he taking the other view? And Romney, the sunshine is up. So, you don't say that. He said, to Anne and I, listen, Mitt, you wouldn't say to I, would you? But the most important thing, perhaps, of the baggage from Mormonism is that it's not only intellectually null and morally very murky, but it's just hopelessly provincial. And whenever they call him tone deaf on foreign affairs. He's not tone deaf, he's world deaf. It's never been a part of his imagination. He thinks the Garden of Eden was situated in Missouri. He's a hick, and believes in a embarrassingly recent quackery called Mormonism. It's a tar and feathers kind of religion. Think of him in Israel, a fundraiser at the King David Hotel, $25,000 a plate. On one side he's got Sheldon Adelson, a very iffy casino billionaire who's being investigated left, right and center. And he reproduces Sheldon Adelson's extreme views about Israel. You'd have to rack your brains to think of anyone less reputable than the casino magnate. Who do you have on his other side? Larry Flint. You know. But it's just, there's no ear for history, for geography. You know, where are you? You're in Jerusalem. And it's ahistorical and hopelessly vulgar. And look at his response to the death of Chris Stevens and those other diplomats. Just from, I know you're all going to vote Democrat, of course you are. But think how the world would vote. I mean, that'll lose him Arkansas to say that, but Tennessee won't like that remark. But just think how the world will vote. And since coming here to live, I feel a real urgency about that. America is the leader of the world. It has shaped the post-Second World War world. Its gravitational example has meant that, you know, it's generally a liberal democratic system and no wars between the great powers. All sorts of, you know, several follies and disgraceful events, but no wars between the great powers because America is, you know, keeping the sea lanes open. It imposes itself. Anti-Americans in Europe should use their imaginations about what it's going to be like when China, a statist, authoritarian power, is imposing its values on the world. It's so important that the right choice is made in the next election. And just think for a moment how the world would choose.
Well, I think that was especially highlighted what's been happening in the last few days in the Middle East, in Libya, and Egypt, and Yemen now. I wonder if you might speak about that for a moment, just because I know you've written about this in the past, and I'm curious for sort of, you know, you might be seeing this sort of collapse of the Arab Spring here, and you see kind of Romney is flailing about trying to turn this into some political point.
Yeah, and he got it all wrong, as usual. He's hopeless on all this. And everyone agreed, universally agreed, that he spoke too soon. And the advice his campaign is giving to people who are threatened by this remark, saying, it's never too soon to stick up for American interests. Well, yes, it is. I mean, you know, foreign policy is all about timing.
Well, I wonder if I might talk for a moment just about, you know, Salman Rushdie, your friend, has his memoir coming out next week, actually, I think, or 2 weeks, which is about his time living under the fatwa. And there's sort of some interesting parallels, I think, with today. And I wonder if you might, just in terms of a sort of you know, a brutal kind of reaction to, in his case, it was a great work of art, in this case, it's a sort of idiocy. But similarly, this sort of kind of used as a pretext for kind of mass violence in the streets, and it's curious to sort of how we haven't come that far in some ways in 25 years.
It always is a pretext, and let's remember that the Ayatollah accused Salman Rushdie of, he said that he was paid $1 million by world Jewry to write that novel. And it was utterly cynical on the Ayatollah's part. He needed to reinvigorate the revolution. He was casting around for something. If the Danish cartoons had happened then, he would have chosen that. It was just to get everyone het up all over again. To get that violent revolutionary energy that he thought was slackening. And Salman was just the one he chose.
The target.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the experience of hiding him and sort of that whole time, or will that
Sure. I was there on the day the fatwa was announced. We were in the same church at the service for Bruce Chapman, another fine writer who died the previous month, and we all gathered in this church on a beautiful day in West London, and Salman came in looking sort of, he was incredibly brave, I thought. I would have crumpled entirely, but looking spooked. And Paul Theroux, who was in the church, charmingly cried out, "Next week we'll be back here for you, Salman." But then we dispersed from the church, and Salman was driven off, and he was already, I think, with his scrambled team of bodyguards, and then he, as I put it in a piece, he disappeared into the front page, and then he watched the news that night, and there'd be a map of the world with flashing points in Karachi and Tehran and Italy and deaths and historical events and buildings, and it was all to accuse an innocent worker. I had an argument with Prince Charles about this at a small dinner given by my great friend Clive James, and Prince Charles, speaking ex cathedra as he does, as he shouldn't constitutionally, saying, "Well, I'm sorry, but if someone insults people's duties," and I said, "Well, no, sir, the novels aren't written like that. On the contrary, a novel is a playful thing, and it's a great violence to a novel to drag it into the world of politics where it really doesn't belong."
And there's some remarkable moments also when so much of the political establishment in the UK kind of turned their backs on him as well, kind of kowtowing to.
Yeah, John le Carre and Lord Dacre. But I thought this is, nothing that Salman did, and what he regrets most is saying that he converted or reconverted to Islam as a desperate move. But and certain people turned their backs on him then, but I couldn't imagine ever turning their back on him. And that seemed to me not hopeless attempt to soften that atmosphere. I mean, in what sense is Philip Roth a Jew? He's not an observant Jew. That you are Jewish in your identity. You're born a Jew. Salman was born a Muslim. And it seemed to me plausible to try that out. And he was in an absolutely desperate position.
We might turn a little closer to home. You've I have to ask, I'm sorry, Martin, but you moved to Brooklyn recently, and I imagine that some of your neighbors might be in the audience here tonight. I'm wondering if your thoughts on Brooklyn and on leaving the UK and coming to America.
Well, we came here for purely family reasons, and also I hoped when we left that that Christopher Hitchens would live another 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, and that was, at least sort of 30% of why we moved. But now we're here, and my wife is in New York and has lots of family here. It's slightly embarrassing living in Brooklyn because it's so pleasant. It's like living in the 1950s. Young couples, pregnant ladies, prams. It's a prelapsarian world, an innocent world. But what struck me most, just in terms of selfishly assessing my day-to-day mood, is that I can't believe how beautiful the weather is here. I don't know why New Yorkers don't stagger around boasting about it for about 3 or 4 hours every day. When I pull the blinds, it's almost, nearly always this great arc of blue. And the people selling newspapers in the streets, they have the newspapers outside. I mean, only a maniac would do that.
If you keep this up, Mayor Bloomberg might ask to record a commercial.
And the flower stalls where they pull the blinds down to protect the blooms from the sun. There's a completely unknown number, where there's a kind of hook coil of sort of greasy darkness in the sky every hour there is. So that and the feeling the force of the cliche of change is as good as the rest. Because where you're having your shower, your shave, all the shite you have to do every day, at least doing it somewhere different. But against this background of blue, makes it beautiful.
So can we expect a kind of New York or Brooklyn novel anytime soon?
Yeah, I said, when we lived in Uruguay for 3 years, in the middle of the last decade, I said the way you live doesn't affect what you're going to write. But the difference is that I didn't have a language bond with Uruguay. I love the people and the place. But here I do have a language bond because I spent a year here when I was a kid, when I was 9, 10. And that means you get fluent in the language. And I've written novels narrated by Americans. And I feel that it's another voice in my head. So I think Brooklyn novel, and it would be slightly vandalistic in spirit. It would be sort of throwing a brick into the picture window.
I should hope so. Yeah. Just go back, in Moronic Inferno, your wonderful collection of essays on American themes from about 30 years ago now, I guess. You wrote a bit about how you were still trying to understand America, and I wonder if you feel like you understand America now, or maybe you're hoping to through living here? Or?
Hoping to, yes. The first generalization about America that has to be accepted is Henry James's, which is America is more like a world than a country. Do not compare Massachusetts to Tennessee. But again, to return, it's also shaping the world as well. American exceptionalism comes down to, I thought, one thing, but in fact it's two things. And it gives us the scale of America, which, by the way, when you come here to live, it really intimidates you, the mass of America. But America was the only country on earth that after the War of Revolution and Independence, actually sat down and worked out what kind of governance they wanted. And then, again, after 1945, they sat down and worked out what kind of world they wanted. And America is the world, as well as being more like the world than the country itself.
Unfortunately, it's not clear that they always worked out exactly how it should be so well. But,
it's always a groping, approximate process.
We just have one more question for you about aging. We all look forward to reading your novels for many, many years to come. But I'm wondering if at a certain point, any writer turns to think about as they only have so many novels left to write, maybe, or so many themes they want to write on as well. And I'm wondering, have these thoughts kind of crept into your, especially with Christopher's death and all that as well? Right?
Well, I made peace with age, and towards the end of my last novel, The Pregnant Widow, things like your hair gets thinner, but that's all right because the hair on your nose and in your ears gets thicker. Your hands get colder, but that's all right because your eyes get hotter and cool, and your wife's breasts get smaller, but that's all right because yours get bigger. Your cock's not stiff, but that's all right because everything else is. So it all works out in the end. But you can say a lot of things about age, and Gogol said age is merciless because it gives nothing back. And I think actually it does give something back. And it's hard to separate this from feelings about Hitchens, but I feel I've inherited his love of life, which was always stronger than mine. And it's to do with you're coming at life from a different direction because you're taking your leave of it. But it all looks much more plangent and precious on the way up, and that is giving something back. Age does give something back.
Beautiful. Thank you, Martin. I think we have time for just maybe 4 questions from the audience. So raise your hands, and we'll start in the front here.
Thanks so much, Nick. Can I push you just give us
a thought or two on the royal family? You mentioned that the Queen was to be viewed with as sentimentality. You don't seem to be terribly impressed by Charles, but nonetheless, they're such a peculiar family. It's in such a peculiar position. I just wondered if you had any sympathetic thoughts about them at all.
Well, now that Christopher is no more, I feel actually perfectly tolerant about the royal family. And I think the Queen is turning out to be a remarkable woman. Her speeches in Belfast, I thought, were fantastic. But they represent a terrific peculiarity of England. That, every now and then, on jubilees and royal wedding days, England loses its sense of rationality, and the results are totally pleasant. And I think in any other country on earth, the loss of rationality would end up by nightfall with, not an unbroken window or an unraped virgin in the whole, in the whole realm. But it isn't like that in England. It releases this reasonless joyfulness, and I also think the royal family helped the ethnic rainbow. There's no one who shows more pleasure in royal events than people from the Caribbean, people from the subcontinent, etc. So I can find good things to say.
I have to apologize, Mr. Amos. Even though I followed your career for decades, I'm not a novel reader, and so my question has more to do with the gentleman who was asking questions about age, because we're about the same age. And I'm wondering, you're a great moralist. I'm listening to all these social criticisms. How would you give yourself an evaluation on that high level of morality? Have you lived your life on a high moral scale?
Thank you very much for that question. Actually, this has just begun to haunt me. But I always thought that, well, the trouble is that what turns out to be important to you in the last leg is that it's not what you've achieved or what you imagine you've achieved. It's how it went with the opposite sex and how it went with children. And men never blame themselves for things when they're youngish. But I think that changes when they get old. They start to blame themselves, reproach themselves. And I think luckily it's the reverse for women, but having always blamed themselves, towards the end they stop. And women seem to go into the last round of life with much more calm than men for that reason. But Sorbello, when he was dying, a friend of his who was the same age, late 80s, went into his bedroom and said, I thought I'd say it this. So I just went in there and said, well, Bello, what are you going to say to yourself? And Bello said, well, Gene, it's like this. This is what I'm thinking. Is it there goes a man or there goes a jerk? That said the Nobel Prize winner for literature. And Gene said, there goes a man. And so okay, I settled for that. But I know what Saul was thinking about was his 4 divorces, his children, how had it gone there. And you begin, your sense of personal honor, which you may have been pretty lax about when you were younger, sort of comes back to haunt you.
Maybe a little bit of a tabloid question, although it's not news, it's sort of old news. I'm wondering if you can tell me how you discovered and how you responded to the discovery that your first novel, by you, a son of a famous, sort of literary figure, had been pretty seriously plagiarized by a son of pretty well-known literary figure.
Yeah. Interesting, but
Yes.
That's water under the bridge.
Okay. I've been thinking about it for like so many years.
Yeah.
And had the opportunity.
Last question.
Hey, Ryan. Listen, you've been accused in the past of being anti-Islam. Do you feel that's, are you more anti-Salafist, or is this bullshit? Like, right now you're looking at what happened in the Arab Spring. I'm sure none of us anticipated it. Where do you feel, politically as a human being after all this stuff you've written? Where are we right now? Like, are we chasing the abyss, or is this all for the good? Do you think that this was just an overreaction in the last few days, or are we in trouble?
Anti-Salafist is not a bad way of putting it, or anti-takfir, which is the heresy by which Muslims can kill Muslims and non-Muslims because of a sophistry about heaven. My younger son, Jacob, speaks Arabic and has just done a second degree on the Muslim Brotherhood. And I talked to him about this, and I said to him, is it weird that that the terroristic vein in Islamism, seems to have already domesticated itself and become part of the political process? And you could see that there were certain voices, Hassan Nasrallah, for instance, of Hezbollah, who obviously very clever guys, and realized that the terroristic push could now come to an end and quickly meld itself into the political process. And I think that is what has happened. But my son said, "Oh no, this is the Islamist hour has come now, and we'll see. They're in power. We'll see what they'll do." I think everyone here probably feels that the revolution, the energies of the revolution, particularly in Egypt, have been completely subsumed by the post-revolutionary polity. But I do feel very anxious about what might happen. And Trotsky called Stalin the grave digger of the revolution. And people said he will not forgive him for 5 generations for that remark. But it does seem as though the revolution is being inhumed at the moment. It's being very...
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.